Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And this is Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. Well, we're back for the second season of Invincible that they inexplicably put into 2 parts, even though it was only 8 episodes and they had them all finished. But here we are.
Yeah.
Seems like they killed any momentum they were going to have, but that doesn't really speak to the quality of the show. It's just a weird
does
choice.
not.
Well, I mean,
it is a weird choice. You're right, it is.
People made a good point. They waited until after they hiked the prices and made the ad tier to release the rest of it.
So, I mean, I'm not going to blame any of the showrunners or creators or anything like that. I'm just going to blame the evil empire that is Amazon.
Yeah, that's not their choice. But yeah, I would say this show is still strong. It's just it was a baffling choice to split it up like this.
The momentum killer thing was definitely not great because I definitely, and I think it'll be evident that I forgot a lot of what happens in the early season because of that momentum killer aspect of it. But, still very much a strong season.
Yeah.
Very, very strong.
And as always, it's going to be hard for me to fully engage since I've read the comics, so I don't want to spoil things, but I also have to remember what has happened versus what will happen. But yeah, I would say this season was pretty much really getting to the heart of whether or not Amber could hang with Mark. Their relationship was definitely put front and center. A lot of what I said in the first episode we did on this about not letting people get away with having the power of fantasy, I think this, especially the last episode, really drives home how much it's a burden and not just cool that you get to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And all the hey, be careful what you wish for, like actually dealing with getting what you say you want, which I would say Amber deals with wholeheartedly, where she's like, no, I want to be in this relationship. I'm just glad you're being honest with me. And you can see the season arc of, at first it's kind of just yeah, you know what? Don't ever apologize. You need to save the world. What do I look like getting in the way of that? I'm not happy if you're gonna not try and save the world. I wouldn't like you if that wasn't you. And then the annoyance of, oh, you're gonna leave me at Comic-Con, or oh, you're gonna, and then down to oh shit, these people will kill me.
Yeah, because that one moment where she goes nope, this is the deal, this is what I signed up for. That's something that she says because she needs to, but not because she wants to at all, right? She's definitely annoyed.
That's the case when she says that. I would say that is something she wholeheartedly believes. I think that's the point of the arc. If she starts there, then it's not really an arc.
Well, that's true. I think
that the point is she is saying, I'm coming at this clean. I'm not gonna hold you to what happened last year. This is what I signed up for. Stop trying to play with kitty gloves with me. I'm telling you this is what I want. And I don't think you can truly respect the character if you believe she's just saying it to say it.
That's true. It's just, the realities of dating Mark is gonna be I'm gonna be gone for months at a time and all that kind of stuff. So and there's this, it gets to the finale where it's I don't even know how long I've been here kind of deal. There's all these things that really, really are just make it so. And I like this because it deals with the whole idea of can you have 2 lives? He deals with that towards the end of the season, but throughout the entire season, it's yeah, I'm in college, I'm doing all this kind of stuff. It's but are you though? It's a fantastic
classes everywhere, and
yeah,
I like the talk he has with Principal Winslow or Dean Winslow, where he's just like,
Yep.
you got to pick, and obviously that gets repeated to him by Adam Eve at the end of like,
Mhm.
say it or don't say it, or like say you love her or don't say you love her, but you got to say something. And Reginald Valjean's character is like, are you here or are you not? And you
Mhm.
say you're here. So that's more of the Amber thing you were talking about earlier of like, he
Yeah.
says, yeah, I want to be here. And the principal or the dean rightfully says, I'll give it a month. We'll see if you actually
Yeah.
mean what you're saying.
You sure about that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fantastic season, right? It's I forget that he is that college age. I forget that he is coming into this because he is so strong. He is all these
Mm-hmm.
kind of things. Like when he and Amber actually, and I think this is the first time that we see him have sex with her, but it's like all those little questions of like, wait, are you gonna get too excited and like basically break my pelvis or
Mm-hmm.
something like that? What are
Which
we
is a
dealing with right
storyline
here?
in The Boys. Not a
Yeah.
storyline, but it's a story beat in The Boys where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, like having sex with these people could kill you or
Y-
permanently disable you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, God, yeah, I can't wait to talk about that when we get to the boys again. But it's very much like this is a very self-aware kind of thing, and I like that she goes like, you know what? Why don't I take the lead on this just
Mm-hmm.
to be safe? And I think that's such a great thing because it really does show like she and him have something special between just the two personalities, but it's the reality of the situation that they can't be together anymore. And I think this is what a lot of people deal with going from a high school relationship to a
Mm-hmm.
university relationship, but with different kind of stakes altogether. It's like, can you be high school sweethearts and then go into a university situation knowing that maybe this relationship might be holding back that experience. It might be preventing you from truly getting everything else. It certainly is the way for Amber in that sense, where she's like, yeah, I don't want to be at this party. I just want to be with Mark right now,
Mm-hmm.
and all those kind of things, which are so effectively done. They're just so well done in this season.
Yeah, I think I said it in the last episode. I don't think they address it here. The whole like
Mhm.
when Mark is with Adam Eve, she says the things like, we just can be up, like we can just stay up here. No one's ever looking up here.
Yeah.
And I kind of tracked through the last few episodes, even in the episode when they break up, Amber looks down for like Mark has to be like, hey, up here, right? And
Hmm.
then the last time you see them on screen together, she looks up like she's now aware of what she's been missing. Like she's
Hmm.
one of those exceptional human beings in the super, like, because she knows like, oh, like up there, I can't just keep my view here. I thought that was a nice unsaid thing, even if that wasn't specifically dealing with that line from the comics. They very
Hmm.
clearly showed that she was like the humans Adam Eve was talking about, or unpowered humans,
Hmm.
until she was fully immersed in that world
Yep.
and saw the good and the bad of it. And then her last scene is her finally looking up, and I thought that
Yeah.
was really well done as well. Again, nothing that happens through dialogue, just character arc played out visually.
It's just this show has always been like you really got to pay attention to what's going on because they're doing something different here, right? You can't
Mm-hmm.
like I can't look down at my phone. I can't do all those kind of things because I'll miss those moments of like, oh yeah, she does her character arc is done now. She's grown, she's fully realized, and she's accepted the fact that we have to kind of separate so that the two of us can do the thing that we need to do on our own. We can't just be together anymore. It's a great arc that will never get spoken of, and they show us instead of telling us, which I always appreciate
Mm-hmm.
when a show can do that, right? This season is truly powerful of the idea of like, who is Mark going to be now that Omni-Man, his dad Nolan, is gone? And
I
I think
hate
it's
it.
interesting what
Yeah.
Nolan goes through, in his own self exile.
Well,
So
that was like when I read the comics, I was so hoping like, because I read the comics when season one
yeah.
ended, I was so hoping like, oh, I hope second season deals gets to the point, which is essentially Omni Man's last line of the season. I was like, I just
Mhm.
really hope that they put that in season two. I'm glad they did. Obviously, they waited till the last second, but like, I I've seen people be like, how dare they try and people who've read the comics, not just watching the show. Like
Right.
I don't like that they try to give him a redemption arc, and I do think that much like we just talked about with Amber and Mark,
Hmm.
the show isn't interested in being like, and that's the end. The show
Hmm.
is showing you like life still happens. So like, what happens to the guy that beat the shit out of his son and then ran away because he got too emotional? Like, you
Yep.
can't just be like, and then that's the end of him. He's a fucking asshole. Like and I'm not saying you have to like Omni Man moving forward. I just find him to be
Mhm.
a very interesting character because he's doing what a lot of people don't do, which is like actually look inward and feel things. Like
Yes.
you see, like the first time you see him in, well, the first full episode with him, which I believe is the second episode
Yep.
of this season,
Mhm.
where the Viltrumites are killing the people on the new planet he's on, and he's like, "Why the fuck do I care? Like this is so annoying. Why should I care about this?" And you're like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, like it's clicking for him the effect Earth has had on him."
Yep.
Um, and I truly appreciate that they're not just like, and that's the end of it. I don't
Mhm.
know what they're gonna do with Amber. Like, obviously, I've read the comics, so I know kind of what they do. I
Yeah.
genuinely don't know how this show is going to do it because they've changed Amber for the better, in my opinion, so
Yeah.
much that. But Omni Man is another example of that, of not just being like, and now they're out of Mark's life. Like, you have to still
Mhm.
sit with these characters that had an impact on him at some point because I like that that's what the comic and the show is about, is like, no, it's not done because you closed this issue. Like there's gonna be something else that happens, and it happens
Yeah.
within an episode, within an issue, but that you are continually forced to deal with these issues. You can't just be like, oh, that's done.
Yeah, yeah, because it's one of those giant things of like, okay, well, us as society have determined him to be bad, so he goes
Mm-hmm.
away, but his story keeps going, right? Does he keep doing bad things, or does he learn from that? That's the ultimate thing, and you're right to point out the complexity of looking at these characters, and like especially like how Rexplosion is, and how like Robot is, and throughout this whole season, it's just
Mm-hmm.
like they all, for lack of a better term, screw up. They really screw up a lot, big time. And it's how they grow through that. And then I think what's interesting is like, and this is what I want to like get your opinion on because you've obviously read the comic book. So like that final scene in the final episode, not the final scene, but the scene in the episode where the Guardians of Earth have found Mark and all that kind of stuff with the teleporting device. It's like, what version is that? Is that Robot growing up, or is that Rexplosion growing up and all that kind of stuff? Because you know, Adam Eve calls the guy in
Rex.
Robot to, yeah, Rex. So I'm like, is this Rex that has somehow not aged but also developed empathy? It's just these are really cool things,
Well,
and
I'll say as someone who read the comics, it
yeah,
didn't make an impact. Like I don't think
okay,
that it goes beyond. So that's the thing. Like obviously, when you read, it goes at your own pace. So like for me,
yeah,
I think the Omni Man saying "I miss my wife" falls flat only because I could keep reading after that and see what that means.
yeah.
It was such a big like pivot point for me for Omni Man, where I was like,
Hmm.
because you're reading, so you it's way more active. You just feel something when that's what comes out of his mouth next.
Yeah.
You've also, my memory is, maybe I'm wrong, but my memory, it's been, I haven't read it since 2021, but like
Hmm.
my memory was that he'd had way more time to interact with Alan, and you'd seen way more of what he was doing while they were prepping him to have his execution. So when he says it at that point, it feels way more like um a completed thought than, let's put that in there for the end of the season. And
Right,
I'm not saying
right.
that that's the wrong way to do it on television. It just felt more so. To that same point, when the Guardians show up in the comic,
Mhm.
you're kind of just like, okay, that's how he gets home. It didn't feel, and there's obviously the conversation Eve has with him that felt like what was more important
Yes.
than what's the implication of Rex or whatever. For me, for reading it, it
Hmm.
didn't mean anything to me beyond we needed to find a way to get him home. And again, my memory might be off on this, but my memory is that that also was a bit more of a process, so that you weren't really thinking about like, oh well, what does that mean for Rex instead of Rudy? You were just like, okay, good, they got there, they're going to bring him back, and then Eve drops that bomb on him of like, I love you, so probably say something.
Yeah. Set me
That
free
was the
or
point.
love me. Yeah.
That was the point of it, and that was what, in my mind, stuck in terms of how the characters move forward.
Yeah, because this season is all about characters moving forward. Who is Mark gonna be now that he's like, oh, I know the extent of who my dad is, and like, and then more importantly, the mom being like, what's her angle in all this? What's she want to do? Because I think
So
she
they
does some
did,
of the
yeah,
strongest stuff here with
she's really
her.
strong, but they did
Yeah.
something that isn't in the comics, which is
Oh yeah.
do the spouses of superheroes thing. That's just not in the
Right.
comics. So
Right.
like that hurt that she feels when the guy's like, well, I hope, like, I don't want you to feel better. I just want your loved ones to be dead. That's just not in the comics. So you're just adding on to that was another thing that, like, after the first season reading the comics, I was like, oh man, I can't wait for the Debbie stuff, because they lean more into her alcoholism and more into her kind of being like, I think they still approach it when Debbie and Mark have their conversation at the end. But in the comics, again, my memory could be off, but my memory is that there's more of an animosity towards Mark of like,
Sure. Yeah.
you just remind me of this shit, and like,
Mm.
why did you fight him? Like, why couldn't you just let him do the thing? Like, it would have, like, I wanted to keep him here. Like, why couldn't you just do that? Which obviously they take out because it means more that she's so steadfast in believing Mark did the right thing for when she deals with Angstrom later.
Yes.
But I just remember in the comics being like, holy shit, like, that's heavy to have
Yeah.
the mom be like, and in the comics they're not saying that's how she really feels. It's more just like she's feeling emotional and she says something she regrets. Like,
Right.
she's not like, yeah, I really did want you to just let him do it. Like, she's like, you did the right thing. I taught you well. Good. But in the moment, there's that moment where she's like, ugh, like, why'd you fight him? Like, why did you even do that? Like, now he's gone.
Yeah, it's like, especially towards what they say toward the end, and I can't pronounce the guy's name. Angstrom. Sorry.
Yeah, Angstrom Levy.
Yeah, Angstrom Levy. How he drops that bomb in the final episode where he's like, in every other multiverse, you go along with it. You're the queen, you support it, and all this kind of stuff. And then highlighting in this one, it's like, no, fundamentally, Mark won't kill. He won't be that bad person because I raised him this way and all this kind of stuff. I think it really stands out. I think it's really, really good. And it's one of those things where, like, yeah, that should have been more devastating for this Debbie, but this Debbie being like, no, I'm
No, I
really
know what I'm doing.
self-assured. Yeah, I'm really
I think
self-assured in this.
that's
It's
what makes
great.
the TV show improve in this aspect, which is
Yes.
the attention and care they give to Debbie to make her not, because I would say that scene is really unwatchable for me, the Angstrom stuff, and it is intense in the comics, but they heightened it for this, obviously, because I can't hear babies cry in in the comics. But like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
You're like, it is really upsetting to hear the baby being distressed while this is happening. And again, because my memory's so fuzzy, I'm like, how come he's not, like, how come his powers aren't kicking in? And I like, I don't know what they're gonna do with the kid, and I'm not saying that in the comics his powers kick in. I think they played that pretty faithful to how it actually happens.
Right.
But in the moment, I'm forgetting, and I'm like, no, like, his powers must kick in. His powers must kick in, and you're just like, no, like, again, now you, the audience, have to sit with this and deal with it. Like, it's not just gonna go away. And I don't feel she's a damsel in distress in this. She is fighting back, and then and she's doing it multiple ways. She's trying to, like, I'm gonna talk to him. I'm gonna use brute force, but you also understand she's there to help Oliver. Like, she's like, she's not like, oh my god, my arm. Like, her arm breaks, she's hurt, and she's like, I can't keep being hurt because my baby is here. Right.
Yeah. She does like the classic self-sacrificing mom stuff here. She is not a damsel. She's just out of her league.
She's just not a
powered
person.
Exactly.
Like, she's not a superpower person. She's a powerful person because of her determination, but she doesn't have physical superpowers.
Yeah, like even earlier in the season where she's like, "Listen, I don't want this money anymore because it comes with attachments, and also that there are other people in, I think it's Chicago, right, that they mess up.
Yeah, they messed up
And
Chicago.
yeah, they're like, there's other people in Chicago that need this money more. I'm like, that's a strong ass character. Like
Hmm.
I love her so much because she's so self-aware. She's like, no, I want to get back to normalcy. I want to do all this kind of stuff, and watching her struggle with that this whole season is just wild to me because yeah, you're right. Like, how could Mark not remind her of Omni-Man and what he
Hmm.
did in season one? Like how devastating those words were to be like, she's just a pet to me and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's wild to see her character arc through this as a
And then she has to be
non-powered
the mother to
person.
his baby that he had with
Exactly. That's
someone
a
else. Like
big
another reminder of
thing.
like, wow, that guy moved on pretty
Yeah.
quickly. Because to
Yeah.
them, it's only 6 months. Uh, and
Yeah, and all of a sudden she's raising love baby number two
I
for
am
Nolan,
I
right?
am really looking forward to the Oliver stuff, I must say. But
Yeah, because I did watch some spoilery episode, like review stuff about this to be like, am I remembering this correctly? I'm like, okay, yeah, I know what the arc goes into, in the comics, a little bit. So I'm not surprised if they kind of start exploring that in season three. But at the same time, I'm like, I think that'd be rushing it, to be perfectly honest, considering
no, there is no rushing it in
really,
Invincible. No,
because I
because
feel like
he ages so quickly. There is no rushing it.
because that's
Oh,
the other thing. Like they did make a point of being like while they're on that bug planet to be like, look, and I like the mom of the birth mom of Oliver in that episode where it's like, look how much I've aged since you've gotten here. That's
that's
only been
also a
like a
change
few
from the
days.
comics.
Oh, really?
Not that they age, but just the agency the mom has in being like,
Oh, I
can
see, I
you
see.
take him because obviously this isn't gonna like, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
be here for long.
Yeah,
I
he's
think
gonna outlive generations before. Yeah.
they did a shift with a bunch of characters in that first half that I really liked because
Mm,
there was a lot of like weird sex stuff with the female characters. So like you know
okay.
how Alan has a partner in this. In the
Yes.
comics, it's kind of like Al Bundy and Peg Bundy, where she's constantly being like, "Have sex with me," and he's like, "No, I don't want to." And you're like, "What is this?" It's annoying in the comics, whereas in this, she's like an equal to him, and
Right.
they enjoy having sex together. It's not like this chore he has to do. In the comics, I
Right.
think they're kind of like his whole thing is I can't do it unless I'm gonna marry, and I have to marry one of my own. You're not one of me things.
Mm,
I'm just glad they got rid of that. And it's just like he is happy
yeah, because
because
that's
that
gross.
relationship's gonna have stress later. You already kind of see it where she's like, "Hey, what's going on?" He's like, "I can't tell you really." Like
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
gonna have its own stress. They don't need the extra layer of like, oh, he's constantly trying to dodge having sex with her, and
Yeah.
that fish thing where he's like, oh, am I gonna have to be your king? In the comics, that is the thing. Like it is,
Right.
oh, you're gonna fight for my hand in marriage, but then he sorts out a thing with the guy who actually loves her so that he can marry. And I'm glad they were just like, that's a stupid thing. What, we're not savages, just fight. Like, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, great, perfect. Like we can move on from that. And there was another character that I don't remember right now, but like there was just these weird things with the sex stuff. And so like I like that with this season they're with the show instead of the comics, they're updating
Mhm.
it so that you're not putting women in these weird like when are we gonna have sex, like what are we gonna do, like I'm doing this for sex, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not that interested in this.
Well, yeah, I think that's really, really smart of them to do, considering they're challenging what the idea of the power fantasy looks like. They're challenging what goes along with that power fantasy. It's like a lot of people when they have these power fantasies, they think like automatically women are going to throw themselves at
Mm-hmm.
us and all that kind of stuff, right? And that's not always true. And the idea of like, no, it's more complicated than that. It's just, you know, these women, especially in the way this show is showing them, is just like, no, there's huge stuff here. Like the only
Yeah.
one that comes close to that kind of damsel in distress kind of trope, and I don't even think this is true, is Adam Eve in the sense where she's like constantly not talking about her feelings to Mark, but then she eventually does it, recognizing the damage it's done on her
Mm-hmm.
entire life, like being like 20 years later without Mark and being like, "Hey, I'm gonna tell him right
Yeah.
now." You know, that's the only kind of thing that comes close to it. There's nothing else that every female character here has self-agency. They do the thing and they're taking their own direction. It's such an amazing thing to see, especially when you tell me about the departure from the source
Mm-hmm.
material about how women are written. I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
that's just such a
And
good,
it's the same
self-aware,
guy
consistent
writing it,
show.
which I appreciate that it shows
Yes,
he's learning from,
correct.
because
It's like
obviously
a James
it was
Gunn
made
kind of
like
thing.
decades
Yeah,
ago, not maybe not
right,
full decades, but like at least 15, 16 years ago. So
right.
yeah, he can grow. Um but back to the Oliver thing,
Hmm.
with I would say this, the sooner they get to him having his powers, the better.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
terms of what it forces Mark to do.
Interesting.
I would I was
Because
going to
I
say more, but I'm not going to. I would just
right.
say I think there's no point in slow playing Oliver.
I
You need to
really
get if he's going to be there, you need to get to his powers.
Yeah, especially with how they are kind of it's like how they have the title screen where it's like each title screen there's more revealing of the black and blue
Yeah,
color scheme, removing the gold and like I know in the comics like how the black and blue color scheme is kind of like the black Spider-Man suit resembling something similar along that lines of like, oh, he's going through a dark phase right now and all that. So if that's what they're teasing for season 3 and you're talking about Oliver aging up, I cannot wait to see what Mark does in that responsibility of like, oh, you have to be the Omni Man now and train Oliver and get all this kind of stuff. And what the perspective are you taking now that you have at least believe in this season that you've killed someone finally, right? There's
so
yeah, go on.
I would say um yes, but I will leave it at that. But I would say I think
Yeah, I can see you struggling.
that leads to a good segue of
Mhm.
like, what I thought was good about this, and I feel like it landed more for me in the show than the comic, but
Mm,
it's still there, which is they successfully did what I think Man of Steel wanted to do, which is
yeah.
really, and I still maintain that Man of Steel did accomplish it. It's just the
Yes.
next movies never dealt with it again, which is
Mm,
you pushed someone who doesn't want to kill,
yep.
and that's gonna fuck them up. And you
Yep.
see it in the show that it fucks him
Hmm.
up. That he was like, no, like I thought you were stronger. You told all of that is from the comic. Like that is
Yeah.
him being like, what the fuck? Like I thought like I wasn't gonna kill you. Yes, they're also showing you how easily he could turn
Hmm.
into Omni Man,
Hmm.
visually and with his anger, but it's there to show you that that's not who he wants to be. Like he's not just saying no, I'm not my dad.
Hmm.
Like that fucked him up. That he actually, and you see when he tells his mom like, I'm not going back to school. I need to learn how to handle this properly
Yeah.
because that's not who I want to be, and so that he can be invincible and not resort to killing
Omni-Man.
people, like
Yeah.
and not resort to killing people, which is what I would assume if you had actually done a Man of Steel 2, maybe that would have been like the cherry on top when he finally learns like, okay,
Yeah.
this is I've got control now. I'm never gonna be put in a situation again where I have to kill.
Hmm.
But yeah, I thought that was really good. That yes, he has done it now, and he doesn't
Hmm.
want to go back there because another thing that's happening all season is him being like, "Well, stop looking at me like I'm my dad. I'm not my
Hmm.
dad." And then by the end of the season, literally the whole family looks the same. They all have the right eye, like black eye
Yeah.
thing. We watched him beat someone the same way his dad beat him.
Yep.
Um, so he knows it's there,
Hmm.
and he needs to work on it. Like that's not
Yeah.
just like oh no, I guess all is lost. It's like I like that his response was, I'm going to take the time to figure this out.
Yep.
I'm not going to
Yeah.
just act like that didn't happen or just
Yeah.
become broody now.
Hmm.
I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah. I very much like what you said about the Man of Steel thing and what Man of Steel should have been. And in many ways, like I'm gonna let the audience know that we did the Superman and Lois season 1 episode to go listen to that because there's one distinct thing in that season that Superman tells his kids is like, listen, I can't ever lose control because if
Mm-hmm.
I do, they'll lose. Like it's kind of like what you said. It's that Superman and Lois Superman has done the work of what Man of Steel 2 would have been really cool to explore of like what happens when I lose control. It's not that I can't it's not about a fear of myself. It's a fear about how other people perceive me
Mm-hmm.
now, and that lack of trust and all that kind of stuff. So like, go watch that episode, go listen to that episode because I think I do a lot of things and say a lot of things about this show that a lot of people would have definitely bet that I would have hated it, but I actually loved it. So go listen to that. But you're absolutely right. I can't wait to see season 3 and how he struggles with that and how he deals with that, because I love the whole process of after he thinks he's killed him, that all the thoughts and all the phrases he's saying, it's like, hey, I'm alone right now. So
Yeah.
why does it matter if I'm saying this in my head versus not? And it allows us, the audience, to really understand where he's coming from. Because there's points in time where he's trying to find a way to slime out of it. Like the idea of like, and then, but finally when he gets to the point where it's like, no, I lost control.
Mm-hmm.
This was me. I did this kind of
Yeah,
deal.
like, well, he forced me. I had to. No, I lost control.
Yeah, because that's exactly what you would expect someone that's like, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. Like to kind of find a way out of. And even what's the guy that keeps, the guy that keeps teleporting in and out and all that kind of stuff,
Oh,
that's with
Angstrom?
the pet Angstrom. No, no, not that guy. The guy that's on the
Cecil?
CIA, Cecil. How Cecil at the end is like, listen, you protected your parents, end of story. Like you protected your mom, you protected
You
your
said
brother,
if at
end
the
of
end of the
story kind
day
of thing.
the bad guys are dead, the good guys are still alive. That's
Yeah.
when.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I like what Cecil goes like. How do you know he's a bad guy? He's like, he broke his arm. Bad guys do that. I'm like,
Well, yeah. Well, the line is, well,
yeah,
how can you tell who the good guys and bad guys are? That's Mark
yeah,
talking to Cecil, and Cecil says, well, bad guys break people's arms, which
yeah,
means like they are being malicious. If they
yes.
needed to kill, they could kill.
They're causing suffering.
But
Yeah,
they're trying to make people suffer, which is, we already heard Angstrom say, I'm going to make you hurt. I'm going to make your son hurt.
yep.
Like, this is the whole point of this. So yeah, like they're showing where Cecil's at. It's interesting because in the comics, um, they could still do all of this, so that's why it's so hard for me to be like, hey, how come this? But it's like they show you Cecil's backstory, like they show you how he got that scar, but it felt like they were doing more like, here's Donald's backstory, and I was just like, interesting.
Season,
Like,
yeah,
I wonder if they're just gonna do that instead of the Cecil stuff, because you basically see what turned him into this hard ass that has these like very dubious things, and like
mm-hmm.
it's weird because they show you that DA St. Clair guy came back and that they're using his robots, which is a big deal in the comic. Like that, like
Yeah,
it's again, I could be wrong on the timing, but it feels like that happens and Mark like basically puts Cecil in a body cast. Like you're like, he's like, what the fuck do you think you're doing? And like
yeah,
fights Cecil. Like obviously it's not a fight, and so like it feels like this incremental thing before he kills Langstrom of like, maybe you should settle down, maybe you should. But that they don't do that there. And also, again, a thing that could happen, so I won't even hint at what it is, but that Anissa woman has a very important storyline, the Viltrumite that comes and is like, I'll help you with the ship or whatever. She's got a very important, I think it's equally as important as Mark killing someone and being like, all right, I gotta sort this out. Like she does something with Mark where you're like, this is very interesting. I haven't seen this explored before. So I'm hoping they don't take it out. But I feel like they really are underplaying what a threat she is and what she said to him. Like I feel like they kind of just move on from it, when really like in the comics you get the sense that like there's a lot of him like really being like, fuck yeah, like they're gonna come back, I gotta figure this out, where they just say it to him and he kind of just, it washes over him, where I'm like, I feel like he should be more worried about the fact that they keep saying we're coming back and we're gonna kill everyone.
Yeah,
because that is a big, like in the comics, it's a huge thing that Viltrumites are like, okay, you're taking your dad's spot now, and like don't fuck this up.
And because if I know this correct, that these actions basically lead to a Viltrumite war, right? And basically,
that's what they're heading to. The whole like read my books, like it's a Viltrumite war, yes, and that's going to test a lot of relationships. People you think are friends are gonna really have to go through it,
right?
But yeah, like these individual Viltrumites that are interacting with Mark, like again, I could have it all mixed up in my head, but I'm like, so they're not gonna do the Anissa thing? Like, interesting choice.
Yeah, I hope that they do in like season 3, where it's like it's gonna be paced a little bit better, because like if and I don't know what the Anissa thing is. I just know where it feels like this is all leading. Just naturally makes sense. It's like, yeah, you're drawing divisions now in the Viltrumites alone with Nolan and his newly identified sense of empathy that he's developed. He's like, yeah, I'm not a Viltrumite anymore. I feel like I care about lower life forms than myself now. What the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like they're drawing this line in the sand, dividing these Viltrumites between the old school like colonistic
Mm-hmm.
perspectives versus what Mark and Nolan are both going through, and you know, other characters are gonna obviously switch sides and all that kind of stuff. But it's I hope what you're talking about happens in season 3 if it makes sense to pace it there. But because if they did it it's
It
episode
makes
7, it probably would have been like, wait, that's a weird lull to take versus the lull that they had, or I shouldn't say lull, but the weird thing where it's like, oh, this episode is actually about Alan, not about Mark, and that's the sex episode that I was talking about.
yeah, but like that's the comic. Like they
Mhm.
just paid homage to the comics. Like that was just a really good payoff of something that you read in the comics. Like
Right.
exactly how that plays out. The same
Mhm.
way in this episode, they were. It's as I said, just as stressful in the comics when Angstrom Levy is in the house, but
Mhm.
they focus a little bit more on him. And like the Batman thing is directly from the comics. You never see
That's so
Batman.
funny.
You just see the
Yeah.
cape. You see him being like, "But don't you think that
That's
that's
that.
lazy?" And that, but since they couldn't get Spider Man and they want to show it, because that I'm sure you've seen, there is a comic where
Yes.
Invincible and Spider Man work together. That Disney was like, absolutely not. You're not
Yeah.
gonna get Spider Man. But
Yeah.
so you
'Cause-
do see him, but like he even talks to Spider Man like, "You're Spider Man," because I just saw like a Batman. What the fuck is wrong with you guys? Like, why do you got such lazy names? Which they can't do that. But like it was just this interesting thing of being like what they keep from the comics. You're just like, oh, nice, like that's nice, and then going into it from before season 1 even aired, I already knew they weren't gonna get Spider-Man. Like there was a bunch of scoopers trying to pretend like, oh, Josh Keaton is voicing Spider-Man, like trying to like seem like that. But it was like, well, Robert Kirkman like actively said we're not gonna get that. Like before season 1 even aired. So like I was like, all right, well then fine, I don't care. But like. It's not a great issue. Like it's not like I was like, oh, I'm so glad I read this. I was just like, oh, all right.
Yeah, it's not like it takes away from anything. It's kind of funny because it's like, yeah, Agent Spider. I mean, the design of the suit's cool. He's fighting Doc Ock, but they call him Professor Ock. It's a great way of doing all these things. But then a meta joke to be like, yeah, they still have the voice actor from the Spectacular Spider-Man here. This is just a great nod of being like, if you know, you know. Like, this is what it's supposed to be, but we're still doing this.
Felt better to me because like
I agree.
In the comics, it's like literally like, wow, we have to go from one place to the other, and he was like, "Don't carry me by the armpits." I'm like, there's a bunch of jokes that are cool in a comic, but given what is happening in screen, because that issue is a separate issue. Like it's not like you could read that if you bought the omnibus for Invincible. You would have to buy it separately, which I did. So like you can afford to have a bunch of jokes there because you're not thinking he has to get back to his family. You can just enjoy it for what it is, even though that is taking place at the same time. So yeah, I liked it that it was like he had this sense of urgency, and they got some jokes in where he was like, "Are you trying to beat up this old man?" Like, well, how are you the good guy? You got glowing red eyes.
Yeah, it's like, no, red eyes means evil. Yeah. And I like that joke because it's like kill mode from the movies. Yes. It's like, yeah, his eyes turn red. It's like these are great meta writing things that I think they did there. Where I'm like, I see what you did there. This is really smart. I like it a lot. It's just some fantastic stuff this season.
But yeah, I think they don't have to do it. I can see many reasons why they won't do the Anissa thing, but I think it's important because it's not necessarily to move plot along, but more building up what Mark is going through. It's important. I shouldn't say important. It is interesting to see a protagonist go through something like that.
Yeah.
And I can't say it any different way because I feel like it'll tip what is happening. But I just want to say protagonist. It is interesting to see a protagonist
Yeah.
go through something like that.
Right. What I think is very, very interesting this season is the Guardians of the Globe development of like as kind of a situation where I'm like, this is the A story in regards to like Earth defenses and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff, but it really has taken the B story in this whole season. But I think it's still effectively really, really well done, where it's like telling us the issues that Rexplosion is going through, robots going through, and multiplicate,
Duplicate.
and duplicate and immortal are going through. Like I think it's a wildly successful that Cecil just stepped in and like, all right, Immortal's your leader now, and I'm like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's that's a good move. That's a
I just like the way
good
he's
move.
like, okay, we analyze everything. It's down to leadership. You guys have shit leadership, so
Yeah,
this is happening
yeah,
now. And I like I think it is Rexpo that's like, oh, tough break for you, man. Like when he's talking to Rudy.
yeah. It's a great thing, and I'm just like, this is some great. They got some great moments there, like especially when Robot goes like tries to step in and like protect
Right, and he stalls because he's like,
Monster.
oh shit, I'm actually here.
Yeah, yeah. There's some great stuff here. It's
But
just fantastic.
I like what they did with Guardians of the Globe. I think that's
Mhm.
what they're called. I almost said
Yes.
Galaxy. But what I liked about it is that they're showing you like, yeah, you can afford to have Mark have some downtime because these people are taking care of shit. Like maybe
Yeah.
not as effectively, but they are taking care of shit. But
Hmm.
the one thing I didn't think worked as a comic reader was
Hmm.
that fight with the League of Lizards or whatever the fuck they're called, where they
Sure.
kill the people who are left.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
that's like that's not how it happens in the comics. So I know they're not gonna not have the storylines that these
Right.
characters have. So like
Hmm.
when they all eventually come back, I'm like, yeah, I don't know why we had that beat where
Mm.
they died. Because other than to like shock people, it didn't feel um right. Because then they have to go to the efforts of being like, we know that his arm got chomped off, he got shot in the head point blank, but he's back, and you're like, because in the comics, yes, he loses an arm. Yes, he's really badly hurt, but he's not shot in the head and presumed
Yeah.
dead. Like you're like he could be fine after this. And the shrinking ray thing, like again, I think that was just to shock people of like, oh my god, that she's dead because she couldn't get big in that guy's throat. And I'm like, but that's not what happens. That's not a thing.
Right.
And 100% I knew they weren't going to kill off Duplicate. I was just like, what are they doing? And then
Yeah.
they didn't even wait till next season to like reverse it, and I was like, yeah, I don't know why we did this.
I mean, I'm fine with that. Like, to me, not having read the comics, I genuinely thought Duplicate was gone. And when
I think
Immortal,
Duplicate is the most successful of those because you at least get
yeah,
the reveal of there's a zero.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
you can't still see the one. At least they can have that. For me, I
mhm,
still was like, I would have rather they do this differently. They don't have to do it the same way in the comic, but it just felt like, all right, whatever.
yeah.
But at least they have that, so it's more successful. I'm more about like the Rexplode and the other characters they're clearly gonna bring back. It just felt like I don't
Yeah,
know
the
why you would.
Rexplode thing felt weird. I was like,
Again,
why
I'm
shoot
not
him in
saying
the
the comics don't
head?
have a moment where you think he's going to die, but it's like the way they did it here. You're like, well, he should just be dead or not back
I
to
agree.
fighting the as quickly as he was.
I completely agree. It just makes me go like, okay, are you a robot now too? Like, is that what's
Well,
going
that I
on?
mean, that is his story arc where they like keep putting metal in, like he
Mhm.
becomes more and more like a cyborg. But it's like, okay, but like he got shot. I guess what they did with Shrinking Ray, which was like, hey, she broke out all her bones, she's still healing, made sense. But
Right.
you need certain beats from Rexplode, so they can't do that with him. And you're like,
Yeah.
then don't do what you did to him.
Yeah. The Rexplode getting shot in the head thing was a bit much because I'm like, in every other there's a lot of characters here where it's like, yeah, we saved your brain so we can get your character to go on the same way. But I'm like, you got shot in the head. Like, you
Hmm.
can't really convince me that that's gonna, work out the same way. And like, so that felt really, really weird. And I was, why did they do that? Because I thought they were generally gonna just kill him off. And I'm like, that would have been effective. That would have been made me feel things. But the fact that they brought him back, I'm like, come on, this
Yeah,
sucks a little bit. That was the only part of this season where I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
this does
That's
suck a little bit. But
I don't have many complaints other than that was one where it's just like in the moment, I was like, oh, okay, then they're doing it differently. But then when the next episode and they reverse everything, I was like, oh, well, then we are gonna do the
Yeah.
same thing, but like you wanted to psych me out.
It was a weird decision, but you know, I don't think it stopped the whole season dead in its tracks. It
No,
was just one of the
no.
things that stuck out to me. I was like, yeah, I didn't like that. Um,
One other thing I really liked going into the whole not letting people enjoy the power fantasy was when Adam Eve rebuilds that thing, and the guy's like, "How do you? I don't know." Or not a guy. The woman is like, "I don't know that that's to code. Why? Like, fuck off. What are you doing?" And then
yeah,
you find out that that building did collapse and killed the like mother who was like sticking up for Adam Eve, and you're like,
right,
"Yeah, like you can't just do whatever you want because you have these powers."
right, yeah, because that was I like that check of her, right? The idea of
Like I'm
like,
pretty sure that happens in the comics as well, but
yeah,
it's just that we're not just focusing on Mark needing to learn these lessons. That
hmm
all of these characters who are powerful, even if they've had them for longer and feel like they have a handle on things,
yeah,
need to learn how to properly wield this power, and that it's not just, hey, I can do whatever I want.
yeah, yeah, because like you know, like in season one where she does like, oh, I'm gonna turn this desert into a rainforest and all that kind of stuff. Like, all right, cool, that's like easy pickings, but like there should be some consequences at some point. They do it at this episode very very well because anytime you can just rely on your powers to do something the easy way, I genuinely think it's an interesting thing from a writing standpoint to explore what the consequences of that fast tracking or just here's a golden apple or something like that, what that would actually look like. You know, is the
Mm-hmm.
idea of like, okay, you're poor, here's a golden apple, but giving a golden apple to a homeless guy is most likely gonna get him like arrested for, you know,
Well, I
theft or
mean,
something because no
yeah,
one, you
and
know, that
it's
kind of
her
thing.
dad in this situation of
Yes,
like,
yes, exactly.
who's like, fuck you. You think I can't like provide for myself?
Yeah, yeah. It's these are some really really interesting perspectives that these characters are now taking too, and it's to see Adam Eve just like, yep, all right, I'm not going to use my powers in this household. I'll live by your rule. Like I getting that check for her, but then also at the end of the season being like, oh, okay, you still exist 20 years from now, so it's that's a temporary like lesson that you've learned, and hopefully you have a better way of doing it later on. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, don't do things for people, give them the agency to do it for themselves, kind of deal, right? I really like that writing beat and Adam Eve's whole arc in this one season and how she loves Mark from afar and how she's not playing games to, you know, be like, hey,
Yeah, I found that I don't remember it this way, but I did see other people commenting that like that
mhm,
conversation she has with Amber in the comics is
mhm.
more direct of like, I want him. So what's your deal
Right,
here? It was like I don't remember it that way, but again, I've been telling you the whole time. My memory is foggy.
right.
But it, I did appreciate that we saw Amber and Mark try their best, and then
Yes.
because I feel like in the comics it really just felt like, and I don't think they were doing it to make Amber look bad, but it just felt like she was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like
Hmm.
this is too much.
Yeah.
And then they split up. And she's
Hmm.
but really playing up the idea, as I said, she's a white woman in the comics, and it does feel like a bit more ditzy. Of
Hmm.
like, well, yeah, I just thought it would be cool to have a superhero boyfriend, but it's actually kind of shitty. Whereas,
Hmm.
I don't think that this Amber ever thought it would be cool to have a superhero boyfriend. She just liked the
Hmm.
person she liked, but
Yep.
still found out it was shitty to have a superhero boyfriend and was like,
Right.
I can't do this anymore. I just, again, I like the changes that are made, the tweaks that are made so that eh, there's there should be no reason for you to come off thinking of Amber as like ditzy or like got in over her head. She
Hmm.
was someone that followed her heart and then realized, yeah, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, fetishizing someone for their superpowers would have been a real like a shitty thing for her to do if it was actually here. And this is why, like, as much as there is a lot of source material, only a 30% part of me wants to explore that, knowing that it's vastly different. The female characters, in the source material versus what we're seeing on screen right now, because I prefer when female characters are written well, and not
Yeah,
devices to be like just in service of men or objects or
yeah.
anything like that, right? So it's hard for me to be like, yeah, I'll get the comics because knowing exactly everything that
I
you're
think they're
saying.
still worth a read, but
Oh, I do too,
as
but
is like
less
understanding the
compelled.
time they were made,
Yeah.
and then be to me it's very interesting and rewarding to see how it's um enhanced by being a TV show, or some places where it's like, yeah, I guess this works better as a comic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's very, very cool stuff. And I will say one of the biggest things is there's very few shows that are animated that I could be like, I know exactly who that voice actor is right now.
Mm.
Like there's like when Alan popped in, like I was
Yeah,
like,
it's
that's
hard to
Seth
miss Seth Rogen. Yeah,
Rogen. Yeah, that's hard to miss. Like there's so many people where I'm like, they really didn't ask them to put on a different voice or anything like that. They're just like the
it is weird
people that
because
they are.
reading the comics, I would have never. I mean, I watched it after season one, so I guess I would never have put any other voice. But reading the comics, I wasn't like, oh, this is definitely someone I would have got Seth Rogen to voice.
Right,
Obviously,
right.
it works because I heard him first, but I
Yeah.
even reading, I was like, oh yeah, like that's an interesting choice to have Seth Rogen do this, and it helped me get through other parts of him, uh, in the comics because I was like, well, it's Seth Rogen, so I it actually helped because there's sometimes I'm like, wait, is he gonna do something shitty? But I'm like, no, it's Seth Rogen. Like, he's not gonna do something shitty.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I really like the character of Alan. I can't wait to see where that goes into and what I
the
assume to be a jailbreak in season 3 for Alan and Nolan.
they've already showed you like, yeah, if he gets beat up, he actually gets stronger, and I'm like, that's it's a very interesting thing they work with in the comics.
Yeah.
Well, just like even at the end where he just let her hit him like that, and he was kind of. I understand he was just trying to trick her, but there's also the element of knowing like, but also this could make me stronger. So yeah, go for
Mm,
it. go, yeah,
yeah.
go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this I mean this season's just this is just a phenomenal show. It's just so great. I like the idea too. It's like, okay, the Guardians of the Globe going back to Mars, dealing with the thing that happened in season 1. How they're like, all right, he's got to stay here. He's got to deal with this, like kind of thing. It's his fault that this all happened.
Yeah, and they're like, run.
And the media like, oh, we're not leaving our own behind. It's such a good show.
I
It's
love
so
when he's
good.
explaining what happened, and you
Hmm.
see like it looks like he's gonna reach out his hand to help, but it's just so he can knock the guy over the head and take his place. And then I can't remember. It's not bulletproof, is it? Samson, who's just like, wait, what happened to that guy then? And then just
Yeah.
completely derails the story. He's like, oh yeah, I guess he's still there. I guess oh, I don't know. They're like, so we have to go get him. He's like, now you get it. Yeah, we should go get him.
Yeah. It's so good. It's those genuinely funny moments with people just being like people. And it's like, all
Yeah,
right, here's how we clean this mess up. I love the whole idea that this is really exploring the consequences or like fallout of the actions and all that kind of stuff and building on top of that. And like you said, the idea of uh, the realities of what you people want, like especially
yeah, like
Mark and
dealing
like
with when
all
you
that kind of
say like,
stuff.
I this is what I want, and then you actually get it. Like, so now what?
Yeah, it ain't the rainbow parade that you thought it was gonna be.
It
It's
could
it's
be,
like
but it's
here's the
like
reality.
there's not like a happy ending. It's not like, okay, I got it, the end. You're like, well,
Mhm.
you're gonna keep living. This is still gonna be something that evolves, whether you
Yeah,
like
you're
it
gonna
or
have to
not.
learn. You have to train, and I love that Mark gets to that point by the end of this season. It's like, yeah, and when he says that whole thing, it's like, yeah, what do you think college is gonna do with the powers that I have? Like, I'm like, yeah, all of this is it makes sense, and I like the idea. Like Debbie is still like, oh, but your future. I'm like, that's you hanging on to the past that you wanted, all that kind of stuff. And when they finally get to that point, it's like, yeah, I agree. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Debbie and
Hmm.
her strength, and I like that Mark recognizes it as well.
Hmm.
I'm just really looking forward to Oliver. Uh, getting
powering up.
powers.
Yeah.
I am interested to see what they do with the Viltrumites coming back. I
Mhm.
think there's only like they can't do the one section of that Viltrumites coming back thing. Like it's gonna have to happen.
It's
But
gonna, yeah.
but that's the thing I still don't know if they're gonna do.
Mm.
And one thing I was just like I have no idea, and then I watched other people reviewing it, and they're like, "Oh, it's from season one." Was like I didn't understand what's happening in that like not crypt, but whatever, like where they're in Egypt and they're dressed like the Jurassic Park people, and the guy comes out and he's like, "Wait,
Oh
you're
yeah, yeah, yeah.
women?" No, I'm gone. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't know what this is, and I've read the comics. I'm like, I don't get what's going on here. People
Yeah.
are like, it's from season one. I'm like, I don't remember that from season one either.
Well, I mean, it's the season one thing where when he's fly, he causes that sandstorm that blocks that guy in. Like that. That's why he's like, "Oh, I found my dad," and all that
Got
kind
it.
of stuff. That's the return of that one bit, and he just
So it's just a
traps
bit
the
because I was like,
daughters.
is this gonna be
It's
like
just a bit.
another? Is this gonna be like another villain thing? No, I can't take it.
Yeah, it's just a bit, but at the same time, when you look at who's voicing those two women, it's just like this can't just be a bit. This can't be just
Who's
a
voicing them?
cameo. I wish I knew before I made that point. I just remember being like, "Oh, that's the people they got to voice this." Um, I'm gonna look this up real quick
Yeah,
while
I'll
we
keep
keep going.
talking while you look that up. Um, yeah, I think that the I don't. I'm not. You can do it. I'm not going to talk about what happens next season or what I hope for
Mhm.
because obviously
Oh,
I
I'm
don't want
definitely
to
not
like.
going to talk
I
about
don't
it.
want to overshoot anything. I
Yeah.
liked when he had to go to the Darkwing dimension, and the guy's like, "We don't say sidekicks. I'm an associate." Um, because that was another thing. Like in the comics, I was like, "Oh, this is intense." When they were able to find some levity there,
Right.
but it was intense in the comics. Um, and I think I said it last episode. The whole like when Debbie befriends the woman who had a superhero husband or has a superhero, I'm like, oh, they're not doing that because
Mhm.
all of that was she needs friends, but it was also this layer of like, but you can't because then you're gonna reveal who I am. Like you're gonna
Mhm.
if you keep talking like that, which they've gotten rid of. They did the Russian guy's wife came over, which I think still happens in the comics, but there was more. And then she's the one that introduces her to the spouses of superheroes, which I was like,
Mm,
oh, this is just new. So that's interesting.
right.
Um,
Oh, by the way, one of the actors is Chloe Bennett.
hmm Oh, and then who was the other one? I remember Chloe Bennett.
Yeah. Chloe Bennett. And I can't remember. I can't because IMDb's got a weird
hmm
layout with this kind of thing, but like Anissa? No, that's not it. But
No, Nissa
either
is
way.
the woman who was in the Flash, and I don't
Oh,
remember what
Ella
else.
Purnell,
Oh,
I think.
from Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
It makes
And
sense to me
it,
that they're just there for that. Like I don't like
I mean, I feel like these
because
are
they can
relatively well-known actresses that hopefully,
everyone's
and I'm just,
relatively well known in this show though. Like they had
I
Mahershala Ali
yes.
like in like for like I would say same amount of actual voice acting.
Okay.
Um
Okay. So it's just like, hey, let's cameo.
you can
And
cut yeah,
literally
like
just
they probably came in for a day and you're going to hear their voices a couple times but not necessarily the same character cuz like Tatiana
right.
Maslany plays like four characters in this season.
That's true. That's true.
I don't yeah, I wouldn't I feel better knowing it's just a bit because those two actresses, as I said, could have come in for a day and done a bunch of stuff. Also,
Right.
one of them is going to be in Fallout. She can't really be a mainstay on this show. It's like
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
Amazon show, and she has scenes in Yellow Jackets, so
hmm
she's busy. And
Yeah. That's true. That's
I
true.
don't. I mean, I can't. It's hard saying you like celebrities these days because who knows what they're doing that's gonna make you look bad when you when people find out you said you like them.
Yeah.
I don't know of anything she's done terribly wrong other than it does seem like the tide has turned against her in terms of people wanting to work with her. So I don't. This might be more helpful to her than her presence being helpful to the show.
Who is this? Chloe Bennett?
Yeah.
Or yeah, and to be fair, I think Chloe Bennett's situation is that she's just like it's kind of like the Brie Larson situation where she just says things that people don't like. but I don't
The
know
only
enough
thing
about
I
Chloe
saw her
Bennett to be
do,
perfectly honest.
only thing I saw her do was not comparable to Brie Larson. That was her
Right.
going after like a fan, being like, "Oh, you're gonna look stupid, buddy," because everyone kept saying she was in Secret Invasion, and then she was not. So, so
Right. Yeah.
I'm not saying that means no one should work with her again. It just felt like she was trying to grab, because she was supposed to do the Powerpuff Girls show, and that got canceled.
Yes.
Like, I don't even think they finished filming it. So
No, I
I
think they shot the pilot that, and then they were like, yeah, no, we're not doing this.
but she had a great arc on Dave, so that's good.
Yeah. I mean, who knows, but it feels like one of those situations where I'm like, did she do something, or does Hollywood just not like her because she won't play ball? That kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's hard to have these conversations in this
Oh, you're absolutely
climate.
right.
You just
Yeah.
you just got to be like, I haven't heard anything. That doesn't mean that I am condoning anything she might have done. It's just
Right.
I haven't seen anything other than that time where she
Mhm.
went after someone. Where I'm like, you're Chloe Bennett. No one knows who this person is. You could just leave it alone.
Yeah. But we'll see. I just assumed that they would have a bigger arc and all that kind of stuff. But I did find that bit to be a little bit funny. It's like, well, you can only have that's sexist.
Yeah.
It was pretty funny to me. It's
Yeah.
like this existential threat. It's like, oh well, the curse was only written towards one gender.
Yeah.
Which the funny thing is, I don't think that's ever been a situation in a body inhabiting kind of
No.
character ever before. It's like, oh, okay, you have this god that's going to take over the Sigourney Weaver's body in like Ghostbusters. Yeah, not a problem. It's just
I
like,
mean,
we
it
need a
is
body.
kind of a part of Hereditary.
Yeah,
Like it's a pretty big sticking point in Hereditary, that it's like,
right.
gotta get this out of the female body and into the male body.
Right. Yeah, and then I guess
Spoilers for Hereditary, but yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it is what. But okay, so I just naturally assumed that they'd have a bigger role just based on their names and their reputation alone. But you're right. The other person, um, Ella Purnell, will be on Fallout, the
Yeah.
series, which we will be reviewing, and I'm very excited about that.
No promises. Don't. I mean, that's the plan, but we can't say anything for sure in this life.
Well, that's true. Everything that we say is true as
When
far
we
as
say
we
it.
currently know it.
Yeah. The plan is
Things
to
could
do
happen
as a
for
season, as a
sure.
full season. The plan is to do Fallout.
Yeah.
So I guess in
Yeah.
that sense, that's a safe bet. But don't look out
Yes.
for it the first day it drops.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. Temper your expectations, people. We are
Yeah.
humans at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is oh yeah, you're right. And John Hamm does 2 episodes randomly too.
Yeah, but
as
like again,
Steve in
probably the
first
same amount
season.
of voice acting.
Yeah, exactly. And I do like when John Hamm just shows up randomly and things. So I'm like, yeah, you're just
he
being
has a
weird
good
right
arc
now.
too. That's the one where he has to go on a trip with his stepson, and the stepson calls him dad for the first time when he thinks he's gonna lose him. That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, he gets a lot to do. But yeah, this is huge, great season. Great season.
I'm a fan. I'm not in the habit of being like, I hope it comes like soon, because I don't want anyone to have crunch. I just want it to come out when it is. But it seems like season 2 was ready to go and they split it up, which is annoying. I hope they don't do that again.
But again, I feel like that's great evil.
No, I'm
Bezos.
This is not me talking
empire.
to any particular person. I'm just saying I hope that the decision isn't made again.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. I very much agree with you on that, because that also means like I hope the price doesn't go up again.
Yeah.
The it's funny. But yeah, this I like that. And there's some people pointing to this as like, oh, this is how they're communicating to us in the whole thing. How like they're talking about that dog superhero that he has poster on his wall throughout this Seance Dog, and then like how they meet the creator of Seance Dog and how he's like, oh, when's the next season coming out? It's like, oh, it'll be maybe a year or two. Like these animated things take a while. I'm like, that's smart. That's clever.
That was a very funny scene where they like kept cutting, and he's like, "Have you ever noticed sometimes when someone's talking, you don't even see their mouth, or we show the back of their head?" I was like, "This is some good stuff."
It's some really, really good stuff. This show is just doing so many things that are just like it nods to just everything that I think is really, really funny whenever they do. it's doing such great stuff. Can't wait to see more of these kind of situations. Can't wait to see more of Duplicate and Immortal's relationship now that they can actually exist. And like, I get where Duplicate's coming from. I'm like, she's like, I'm tired of dying. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, that makes sense. And like the fact that her and Immortal is I like how Rexplode is constantly like, ew, old much older. It's like, well, my duplicates and like all this kind of stuff were closer to age, but also I like that through line of hers is like nobody else knows what it's like to
hmm
die as many times as I have. He does. And I'm like, that's just such good
yeah. We just
shit.
connect. Yeah,
Yeah. It's great. I love it.
they found their people, and I
Hmm.
like that it's not just her. Immortal saying like, I've never cared about someone like this before. Like, I already know
Yeah.
that like people can just die and I'm gonna outlive everyone. Just, but I care about this.
Yeah.
Don't knowing all that, I care about this relationship.
Yeah. He's doing like the Nolan thing without trying to dismiss it. He's like actively trying to figure out like why is this feel different? And
It,
comparing it to all the other times, right?
I will say this will sound like I'm trying to defend Nolan, but
Mhm.
it's different circumstances there where he
Yeah.
knows him giving into that means death, whereas Immortal doesn't have that issue.
That's true.
Immortal will
That's
just have a
true.
broken heart versus it will mean death if I give in to this shit. Like
Right.
that's what I like about that fight when he was like, "You're not fighting to kill; they're fighting to kill. So
Mhm.
you're gonna get us killed if you keep doing what you're doing."
Yes.
In the second episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not trying to say like, "Oh, give him a chance." I'm just saying he is an interesting character
Mhm.
because he doesn't have the luxury
Yeah.
Immortal does.
Yeah. You're absolutely right
And he's
about that.
still getting there, even though everything about him would tell him, "Don't do this."
Yeah. No, you're right about that. You're absolutely right about that. He's under very, very different circumstances, especially in those final episodes where it's like, yeah, our rules are a Viltrumite cannot be executed unless they're like,
Up to physical
like,
peak or whatever. Yeah, we can
yeah,
bruise you, but we can't have you hobbled.
yeah. It's some great stuff, especially because like that one guard, that's what it was like, sir, please, I've looked
Yeah,
up to you my
yeah.
whole life. Please, it's like I was gonna say, let me walk back on my own. I'm like,
hmm
that's a pretty badass thing.
hmm
Like that's a great moment for Nolan. And you're right. It's difficult because I think Nolan's character is so interesting. I'm like, yeah, I want to know what you're gonna do in season three now. Like, it seems to be pointing at some sort of redemption arc, which people are like, oh, I don't want it. I'm like, no, I do want that. I just don't want Debbie to go back to him immediately. You know what I mean? It's just the idea of like this character is changing. Now, I do believe that he and Mark would fight side by side and all this kind of stuff, like what Mark assumed it was going to be.
I think that's what it was. Again, it's all jumbled in my head. My
Mhm.
memory was it felt better hearing him say, "I miss my wife," because
Mhm.
I'd already seen the progress he'd made, but
Yep.
also that it felt like Debbie was happy without him. Whereas I don't
Yes.
think the show is necessarily there with Debbie. I think
Right.
she's getting there, but she's not happy with that. Like she hasn't moved on yet, and I don't mean that in she's pining for him, but she's still very much pulling the pieces back together of her life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas it felt
Because
like she was in a better place when that was said, so it felt more interesting to be like, well, then what does that mean when he wants to go
mm,
see her or whatever?
right. And yeah, because you're right. This is not someone that's dealt with this yet. She throughout this whole season, she's like, was has my whole life been a lie? Am I a fool? And all that kind
Mm-hmm.
of stuff. And like very real emotions that like resonate deeply within me. It's like yeah, this is a tough situation for her, but she's
Mm-hmm.
doing the best she can. But you're right to say that she's not over it. It's clearly impacting her, and it probably will for a long time. I just like
Yeah,
the fact that she's got those supports around her, and that she's actively using, and that
yeah.
she's standing on her own, and all that kind of stuff.
The
The
nanny
nanny's
who
a good
is
touch.
Callista Flockhart,
Did not know that.
is she's interesting in the comics as well.
Yeah.
Like they show you right. I'm not trying to like be coy. Like they show you right away when she's like, "I'm telling you right now, I was sent by Cecil, but I
Yep.
don't want to operate that way." So
Mhm.
it just makes her interesting that how upfront she can be,
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah, that informed consent that she brings to the table is really, really interesting, and I like that a lot. Because Debbie ultimately goes like, you know what? Yeah, I can't get
Yeah,
away from him,
yeah,
but like at least this person I can trust
yeah.
to
You're not going to lie
have
to me.
Oliver, to have Oliver's interests at the best of. their mind and all that kind of stuff. I thought that was very effective. It's
Well,
good stuff.
is there anything else you wanted to say, or do you want to rate?
No, let's rate this thing. Let's rate it.
I'm gonna give this season a 9.
Yep. I'm at a 9.5, baby.
Excellent.
The only thing was the Rexplode thing where I'm like, maybe you didn't do that. And it'd be a perfect 10.
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, I don't know. Am I at a 9.5? Who knows? I have to think about it more.
That's fine.
You know what? I'm gonna go to 9.5 as well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to 9.5. We did it. We're at 9.5s or all around. What a great season. Yeah. So thank you very much for listening, everybody. We're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Game Movies, Crunches and Pod, and Springfield Googleplex. So please go to thatshelf.com. You'll find those shows, our show, and more shows. Trust me, there's more shows. So go out and watch or listen to those podcasts. If you want to find out, like, hey, are we ever actually going to do Fallout and when? You should follow us on social media at TDS Spoiled on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, and our website, if you want to hear older episodes, is tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten, or you can subscribe on all the different podcast platforms. Rate, review, subscribe, share, follow, do all that great stuff. And yeah, we'll be back next week. I almost said what we're gonna do next week, but I already said no promises. We'll be back next week. That's the only promise I'm giving. Goodbye.
That's right. Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.